Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for this next guest. We have Kara Elise with us. She is an embodiment coach, and she's going to explain what does that even mean, because I'm sure for some of you are like, I don't know what that is. So I'm super excited for you guys to hear from her. Kara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Toni. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm super excited. So the first question I always ask my guests is to introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
That's a great question. I'm glad to do it. So my name is Kara Elise Campbell. I am an embodiment coach, like you said, and that is a very ambiguous term, right? Like this term embodiment coach, what does that mean? So when I talk about embodiment, what I really look at is this sense of being fully aligned, mind, body, and soul. And a lot of us have been taught to live very disconnected from our bodies, right? Like we've been taught to not trust them. We've been taught to constantly be on diets, trying to control them, whatever it might be. And so we've been out of touch with the language of the body. So really what I do is I help women come back home to themselves, and I help them relearn the language of their body so that they can live full and satisfying lives. And the why I do it is because at the end of the day, I want to help women get free. I feel like when women are free, when they feel connected to their bodies, they're connected to their lives. So they're showing up more fully in their lives. They're showing up in an authentic way and in a powerful way and in a way that they have clarity and sound mind and purpose. So really that's my why, is I want to help women get free.
I love that. Did you personally struggle with feeling maybe trapped, or you were maybe living a life that wasn't aligned with your purpose?
Yeah.
And then what did you do? If so, what did you do to kind of shift that so you could do what you're doing now and then teaching others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lived a lot of my life, most of my life, really up until my early 30s, very disconnected from my own body. And that manifested in eating disorders. It manifested in a very distorted relationship with food. And then it manifested into dysfunctional relationships outside of myself, right? Dysfunctional relationships with guys, unhealthy friendships. And really, when I came back home to my body, when I was able to heal this relationship, this relationship with the body that I'm in, it transformed my whole life. I always say when we connect to the body, we unlock our lives, right? When we actually come back home to ourselves and we're living from this true and authentic space, then we can live the life we desire to live, right? So for me, a huge part of my story was healing this relationship with my body. And when I did that, I all of a sudden things started shifting, right? Like I began to trust myself with my own body, trust myself with food. When I was able to do that, I was starting to trust myself in other decisions, starting to trust myself with the kinds of guys that I was choosing, starting to trust myself with the work that I was doing. And I think really what happened is I reattached to that internal compass that each of us have, right? Like we all have that deep internal well of wisdom and this compass that's meant to guide us. But when we're out of touch with body, it's sometimes really hard to tap into that deep intuition. So once I did that, then I was able to get very clear on the work that I wanted to do in the world. And I was able to get very clear on the kind of relationship that I thought I was deserving of, right? So getting connected to my body really transformed my whole life.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. I think a lot of people don't recognize that, when people join my program and they work with I do mostly food stuff,
Yeah,
healing their relationship with food, but we know it's bigger than that, right?
so much more.
But I tell them the purpose of it is so that you can go and just live your life and do anything that you want to do and just love it and appreciate it. And very often they'll say to me, I didn't realize that trusting my hunger cues was going to meant I was going to be able to trust, good people in my life and
Yep.
be more open to bettering relationships and no longer settling for I mean, I've had so many people join the program for their nutrition. And I find out they end up changing their jobs because they were settling for something that was just so mentally and emotionally and physically draining for no reason.
Yeah. Because it's so interconnected, right? It's all so interconnected. And I love
Yeah.
that you do break it down to something as simple as food, because it's really not it's not that simple. It translates into so many different aspects and areas of our life.
Yeah, definitely. So what's an example of maybe when someone isn't listening to their body,
Mm, yeah.
and what are some, either the ways that they're living their life or the things that they're doing or not doing? What's an example of someone who's kind of detached for their body? I've had people literally, they say to me, I didn't realize how excuse me, but like shitty I was feeling until I started feeling better.
Yeah.
You know, because they're just so disconnected. They don't even realize that like how they're treating their body is just not well. So like, what are some signs or what are some things that somebody might be doing that's a clear indicator of like, okay, you need to slow down a little bit and pay attention a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that. I also didn't know how disconnected I was from my body until I started the reconnection process, right? And it's funny, as you were asking that question, I was recalling this experience I had on Instagram last week. I was watching this girl who, she's an influencer, and she went on a rampage about how quote unquote listening to your body is like basically an excuse to do whatever you want and eat whatever you want. And she went on this rampage, and she was like, if I listened to my body, then I would eat Chick-fil-A all day long and ice cream all day long. And I responded, and I was like, babe, that's not listening to your body, right? That's not listening to your body. But I think there is the need to kind of clarify what we mean when we say listen to the body, because if you really listen to the body, you don't want to go out and binge on Chick-fil-A. Your body doesn't really want that. That doesn't make the body feel good, right? So I think an example of someone not listening to the body is really not tuning into what is making the body feel holistically nourished, like feel really, really holistically well and nourished. And I know for me, when I wasn't listening to my body, I was following a prescribed diet, right? So I was doing keto or something because I thought in my mind that that was the best way to lose 5 pounds. But I wasn't actually listening to how it made my body feel. I was more mentally thinking like, this might make me lose some weight, right?
Right.
Instead of asking my body, like, how do you feel without carbs? Wow, you feel kind of crappy without carbs, right? You feel tired, and you feel that like you want to emotionally eat. And so for me, really, really tapping back into like, what is the body saying? And I think when we talk about this idea of listening to the body, a big piece of it that I think gets overlooked rather, is that listening to the body actually is a discipline, right? Just like listening to you. If you and I are having a conversation, Toni, and you're telling me a part of your story, and I'm just like interjecting with my opinions over and over, I'm not listening to you, right? But if I create a safe space for you to share with me what you're thinking, what's going on in your inner world, and actually talk to me, that's listening. And it's the same way with the body. We have to slow down enough to say like, body, what do you need right now? Like, what would feel good to eat? What would feel good to move? How would you like to move today? And kind of have this conversation and this dialogue with the body so that we're actually listening to it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you know what though? I'm going to challenge you on that. I agree with you 100%, but I'm just thinking as a listener who's kind of new to this, that's scary.
It's 100% scary.
Right? Like it's probably really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, think about it, right? Like it's so much easier to let someone else tell you what's best. To let someone in any area of your life. It's much easier to default to someone else's expertise or someone else's, thought about how you should live your life and what's good for you. And I really rest on this foundation that we are all so bio individual. Like we are so uniquely made up that what might poison you might not be bad for me. Right. So even knowing my own body, I don't do very well on dairy. I love it. I don't feel great on it. Right. Some people are totally fine with dairy. And so it is scary because it requires a massive level of self-trust that I think a lot of us are scared to tap into, because then all the responsibility falls back on us. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Which is why, not to toot our own horns, but I do think that working with a coach is super helpful, because then it's not like we're not telling you exactly what to do, because that wouldn't be serving you. That's like any other diet. The diet just tells you what to do, but doesn't teach you anything. But working with a coach who can educate you, who can guide you, who can gently kind of push you into the direction that is probably going to serve you, and then be there to support you when it does feel uncomfortable, when it is a little bit scary. That's really great to have like a cushion, so that it's not so like, well, I only know one way. Because that's another thing too, letting go of like, someone who's dieted their whole life, that I thought of not dieting, they don't even know where to start. They don't even know where to begin.
You're so right. And I think too, like we all need we all need safe space and we all need mirrors, right? And so a coach is a really great space to, or a coach offers a really great space to process out, like, this is what I'm working through, and then mirror back to you kind of what you're working through.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So what about, like, say you're listening to your body, but what if your body is tired?
Yeah.
What if your body is bloated? What if your body is bigger and you look at, maybe you have poor body image, right? So like maybe in your mind, your body is quote unquote bad. You don't like your body, you hate your body. What would you say to somebody who is really struggling with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I love this question, Toni. I think I love it because it's where I came from. I spent most of my life really in hatred towards the body I was in. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like so much compassion for that, right? I think that when I think about the body and wanting it to change, or not liking it, or sitting in a posture of hatred towards it, what I really think is that it's in loving relationship that we feel safe enough to change, right? So in my marriage, if I feel super safe, then I feel like I can grow and expand and change and become a better version of myself. If I don't feel safe, I'm going to close off. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to be scared, right? And with the body, if the body knows that you hate it, it doesn't feel safe, right? Like if the body is always feeling like you're criticizing it, beating it up, telling it it's ugly, whatever it might be, you're creating kind of an ecosystem of non-safety for the body. And so what I really like to do with women is help them get back to this place of, maybe you don't like everything about your body, but you're going to choose to love it really well, right? We're not going to try to change anything about it until we get to this posture of like, I'm going to love you. Even if I don't like you, I'm going to love you so well that I create enough safety in this ecosystem for you to change if you need to, right? And I'm sure you've seen this with so many women. I feel like the moment they get into this posture of self-acceptance and self-love, that's when the weight actually comes off, right? It actually kind of just falls off because the body's no longer constricting and holding on to the things that it needs to, the things that it's holding on to protect itself, right? Because it doesn't feel safe. And so a lot of what I do with women is get them back to this place of helping them feel safe enough to love the body that they're in. And again, loving the body you're in doesn't mean that you don't want it to change, right? It doesn't mean that you can't work out and you can't lose weight, because sometimes those things are really necessary. But it does mean almost changing the intention and the why, and really looking at, why am I coming into this? Am I coming into this from a posture of hatred, or am I coming into this from a posture of love?
Yeah. One thing I say is you can love your body and also want to change it. Like
Absolutely.
it's totally okay. And kind of also to piggyback off of that, when you're in that place of gratitude, love, acceptance, you are going to treat your body better. You're going to just do things because you feel better. When we feel better, we do better.
Yeah.
But if we stay in that place of hatred and negativity and we kind of go to that mindset of like, what's the point? Why even try? And you
Yeah.
don't want to treat your body any better. Or if you do choose to take action from that place, it's often very rigid, very restrictive, very like all or nothing, and it's not sustainable. And then it brings you right back to where you started. It's not helping you, it's not serving you. So yeah, oh, that's so helpful. And
It keeps you in the cycle, right? It keeps you in the
yeah.
death cycle of like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna diet, and then I fall off the bandwagon and I feel so bad that I come right back into this diet. And it's just a really vicious, unkind cycle.
Yeah, really. It's really exhausting, and it holds you back. Definitely hold you back. So what are some tips that maybe you give to clients or your followers when it comes to improving their body image?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I think sometimes when we ask this question, we got to do a little digging. Like, and part of that digging is, it can be really uncomfortable. I always tell people that getting embodied is very scary because sometimes when we get embodied, we have to unsurface the things that we've buried and the narratives that we just naturally believe. And looking at those things can be pretty uncomfortable, right? It can be pretty scary to look at all this stuff that that we don't necessarily want to be looking at. So for me, I feel like, so I love this question of tips for improving body image, because I feel like some of the beginning work of improving how we think about ourselves is really digging up some of these stories and narratives that we've naturally absorbed without even thinking about it, right? So for me, part of my story is that I came from purity culture. I grew up in a really conservative church. And if you're familiar with purity culture teaches that, first of all, that you can't have sex before marriage, but also that really that the body is bad, that the body is innately sinful. And so as a woman growing up in purity culture, I was taught that I needed to control my body, right? And make sure I didn't use it as an object to tempt men. And so for me, part of my journey of restoring my sense of body image and my view of myself was digging up this stuff in purity culture where I was taught that my body was bad, right? So I think part of the beginning of restoring body image is really looking at what are the narratives that you've absorbed? What are the stories that you tell yourself about what the body should or shouldn't be, right? Like we all have these like silent subconscious thoughts that are constantly running through our brain telling us what we think the ideal body should look like, right? And so really posing a question to those and saying, do those serve me? Are those actually accurate? Do I really think that my body needs to be a size 2? Do I really think that I need to lose 20 more pounds? And then following that stream of thought too, because I know for me, I would disqualify myself from life because I thought I wasn't the size I needed to be, right? So I would disqualify myself from being in a relationship, or I wouldn't show up to the party, or I would disqualify myself from work because I thought that my body should be something different. And what's happening there is ultimately it's just a form of self-protection. We're afraid of fully being seen and fully being vulnerable. But I think in terms of practical tips in improving body image, one practical thing that my therapist had me do from day one is to look in the mirror and tell myself how beautiful I am 3 times every single morning. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is so silly. I don't want to do that. But I would literally look in the mirror and be like, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful 3 times. And over time, what's really powerful about the brain is we can change what our brain thinks by the power of our words, right? So by simply verbalizing something, you start to believe something different. And simply by saying out loud a truth about yourself, you actually start to change the way you think about it. So that was one practice for me. Somatic practices, so breath work and meditation for me has been really, really helpful. And it's really helpful for a lot of my clients. And meditation too is another way to simply change the way the brain thinks, right? To change the pathways that have been so ingrained in us. We grow up as little girls thinking that our bodies are something to fix, right? That's taught to us from day one. And so part of what has to happen in the changing your sense of image for yourself is that you've got to change the way you think about it, right? You got to change the way you're thinking about the body that you're in. And that can happen through things like meditation.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I think what I'm hearing you say is that our beliefs dictate our thoughts. So if you believe or try to believe, if you believe or you say, or even you think like, I am beautiful, you'll start to look for the ways that you're beautiful. And then also, like you said, going back into your childhood and kind of challenging those thoughts and those things that we were told to as kids. I think that every, I guess era, I don't know if I'm using the right word, but like decade, I don't know why I'm like not thinking like, oh my God, why can't I think of the word?
Almost.
Generation. That's the word. I think every generation, I think we get smarter and we get wiser. And when I'm working with women who are a little bit older, I remind them that they grew up with their parents believing like, their role model was like the model Twiggy, who was literally like a stick size figure. And that was considered what was considered beautiful. And so therefore anything a little bit out like bigger than that is automatically not beautiful. And that's what they grew up in. I'm hoping that people growing up in the younger generations are starting to see that you can literally you can love your body at any size.
Yeah.
You genuinely can. And it has nothing to do with like the number on the scale. It literally has everything to do with how you see yourself, how you take care of yourself, and your belief system around that. And so if you believe that you can be healthy or love your body at every size, then you're going to do the things that are required to show love and respect your body at any size.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said that so well. But when we love something, we treat it really well,
Exactly.
right? When we love something well, we want to take care of it and give it the best things and make it feel the best.
Yes, exactly. Oh, this is so good. So good. So one thing, just to kind of like, I guess one other topic I did want to just go over was when I was looking on your Instagram, I loved that IGTV that you did about split energy.
Yes.
And I think that's like super powerful, and people don't even realize like what they're doing or how they're doing it, and like, so can you speak a little bit about what split energy is and what it looks like for someone?
Yeah, I get really jazzed talking about this. I'm going to probably use more hand motions as I talk about it. So split energy, it's a really powerful concept. I learned about it from Abraham Hicks. And what it says is split energy kind of references wanting something, but, right? So split energy is when we walk into a situation and we say, I want Diet Coke, but I also want the lemonade, right? So we kind of have the both wants. Or I'll use a practical example for me. Let's say I want to have a big house, right? I'm dreaming about this big, beautiful white house in Nashville that my husband and I want to buy. I want a big house. But, and then I let my thoughts go to, but I don't know if I can make enough money to buy that house, or I don't know if I'll be a good steward of that house, or actually maybe I want a yellow house, right? So it's when we put our mind or intention towards wanting something, and then we literally split the energy by having the but, like I want but. And the universe loves clarity, right? Like universe is always bringing things into our world that we want. But so many of us are operating with diffused wants or wants but. And so for me, it was a really big eye-opening experience. I tell people all the time, and this is a fun food analogy, but I tell people that I had Yogurtland complex. And Yogurtland complex was when I would walk into Yogurtland and I always would get the cookies and cream and cheesecake with like the graham cracker crumbs on top. I was consistent in my order. But when I would walk into the door to Yogurtland, I would immediately go and get the sample cups and try every single flavor on the wall just to make sure that I didn't miss out on another flavor, or just to make sure this isn't the day that I change my mind. Or what if I actually want strawberry today, right? So that by the time that I actually got my cup of cookies and cream and cheesecake yogurt, I didn't even enjoy it that much because my stomach was full from all the samples I had tried. And so it's the same kind of energy that where we want something, but we don't really believe that we're going to get it, or we don't believe that we have the capacity to create it or hold it or whatever it might be. And so it keeps us kind of paralyzed, right? So if you imagine, even this is visual, I know we're on a podcast, but if you imagine looking at something, if you can see what you want, you can walk towards it. But if all of a sudden your eyes go like this, right, then you're just kind of stuck in paralysis where you can't actually move towards the thing you want because you're stuck looking at being that wishy-washy person of like, I want this, but I want this, but that's split energy.
I love that. Okay. So last question, what would somebody do to gain clarity so they don't have that split energy? Like, do you think that sometimes that split energy is because maybe the thing you're going for maybe isn't aligned or isn't serving you? Or do you think it's just us getting in our own way?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both, right? Like I use my marriage as an example. I was the girl who said, at 21, I said out loud to my friends, I was like, I want to get married later in life, like 25. And I thought 25 was so late, right? So late. I met my husband at 35. And so for me, those 10 years, that 25 to 35-year-old, 35-year singleness, for me, that gap of singleness was really looking at, do I really want this? Do I really want this? And I would say all the time, I want to be married. I want to get married. I want to get married. But I also really wanted to travel and go on adventures and live in my loft in downtown LA by myself. And so I was kind of operating in split energy. And when I got real, and also a caveat to that is that I also was not very clear on the type of guy that I wanted, because I was disconnected from my body. So I kept choosing men who couldn't choose me because I wasn't choosing myself, right? Like I was waiting for a guy to choose me to make me feel valuable. But really what I had to do is own my value, like really come back home to my body, fall in love with my life, choose my life fully. And then I got really clear on the kind of human that I wanted to partner with for the rest of my life, right? So that's an example where I think that in terms of understanding, is this split energy, and am I like sabotaging something in my life, or is it just not the time for that thing to come into fruition? I think that's for each person to discern within themselves, right? But one way to know if you're operating in split energy is, for me, what I do is I really test, like, do I really want that thing? Like, do I really, really want that White House, right? And if I really do, is this but of my own self making, right? Like, but I don't know if I'll make enough money. Is it a limiting belief that I have that's causing the but, right? So that's one way to kind of ask yourself, like, is this split energy coming from a limiting belief about myself? And if so, then how can I work on healing this limiting belief so that I can have full clarity to move towards the thing that I want?
Yeah. It's hard.
It's so hard.
It's hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. But I think what you're saying is the more that you can trust yourself and be embodied and, be knowing your body and your mind and your soul and everything, then you get really good at being able to identify, like, this is just a limiting belief versus, like, oh, you know what, maybe this is something that I'm doing for ego. Like, maybe that's why I keep having split energy, because it's actually not something that I want. It's just like something I'm trying to prove or something,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think split energy is also interesting with food. I've been thinking about this recently where, I would eat a cookie in my past. I would eat a cookie and then feel so bad about eating the cookie, as opposed to just being like, wow, that cookie was delicious and enjoying it, right? Instead, I would feel bad and I would be like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that cookie. I didn't want to eat that cookie. Why did I eat that cookie? And split the energy around it. And then that would send me in a spiral, right? Because then I wasn't even trusting myself. I wasn't trusting my body with the cookie. I was telling my body, oh my gosh, I did something so bad, panicky. And I think there's something interesting, and I haven't fully fleshed it out, but kind of diving into this idea of split energy with food, right? Like when we eat something, almost just commit to it, just fully choose it and celebrate
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's like rule number one. Like, if you follow like intuitive eating principles, which I use part of it, but I don't do all of it, but it's basically making peace with food. It's giving you permission and making a choice and being in charge of your choices. The second that you're clear and in charge of your choices, then you can like sit and be okay with that. But yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people need to do a lot of work on, because it's so funny to me. This is like the irony of it all, is we know that, like, obviously most of the time, if we want to choose foods that are nutrient dense, we're doing it because it's going to make us feel good. We're going to have more energy. We're going to have more clarity. We're going to just like, feel better. We're not going to get sick, all that stuff. When we choose something like a cookie, we know it's not for nutrition purposes, right? We know it's purely for the enjoyment and the flavor of it. Yet 97% of people who have a disordered relationship with food sit with guilt, shame, and they basically abuse themselves mentally and physically afterwards. You literally destroy the original reason for having something that's more indulgent. There's no other reason to have it other than it tastes good or you want to have the moment of enjoyment. Yet you sabotage that right away by not giving yourself permission, by having this ridiculous belief that you're not allowed to have a cookie, and then just beating yourself up about it over and over again.
Totally. And your poor digestion system, right? Because the moment you start stressing out about eating the cookie, your digestion system goes, it clenches up and it constricts. And if I'm eating a cookie and I'm stressed, it's going to digest totally different than if I'm eating a cookie and I'm celebrating and I'm excited about how delicious this cookie is.
Totally. That's so funny. I just recorded a podcast about like ways to decrease bloat. I think it's coming out. It'll be out before this one. And I use the example of like this saying, like when you call someone a tight ass, like there's a reason behind that.
Yes.
Like that's so good. The stress, the anxiety, the digestion. It's all related. It's all together.
Totally. It really is. It's all connected.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, this has been so great. Is there anything else that you feel like our listeners need to know, or maybe topics or conversations or anything that you wanted to kind of share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think a final thought on my end is whenever we approach body work, whether it's like the way we're feeding ourselves or the way we're showing up for ourselves or any of our body practices or working out, I think for me, a big turning point in my life was when I learned that I needed to be kind to myself.
Mhm,
And so
mhm,
now that's kind of the foundation of the work that I do with women is how do we start with kindness? How do we
mm,
start with unconditional self-compassion and
mhm.
kindness, right? Because I am much more likely to to enjoy something if someone's being kind to me.
Yeah.
And I'm more likely to show up and respond if someone's being kind to me. And so in the same way with the body, how can you just simply today ask yourself like what would it look like to be a little more kind to myself today,
Mhm,
and I think too, like piggybacking on this is that one thing that I realized is when I was having such a hard time, when I was feeling down or I didn't like my body, I would be mean to myself, right? So my inner voice would be really mean. And I had this wake up moment one day where I was like, why, when I'm having a hard time, am I being mean to me? If you, Tony, are having a hard time, I'm going to be nice to you. I'm going to be
yes.
like bringing you snacks and giving you hugs. And when I'm having a hard time, why is it my tendency to be mean to me? Right. So I think really just asking the question, like, what does it look like to to stop that inner critic? And I know it's so hard. It's lifelong work, but what does it look like to just add a little more kindness to yourself into your day?
Mm. Ah, I love that. I love that. It's so powerful and so true. Oh, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Kara, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on the Instagram. My handle is at by Kara Elise. And then my website is bykaraelise.com. And then my YouTube is just youtube.com/Kara Elise, no by. But anything that you want to chat about, DM me. I love connecting with people and yeah, would love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, guys. Definitely go give Kara a follow. And if you like this episode, take a screenshot of it, share it on your story, tag me, tag Kara. Let us know what you liked, what your takeaways are. We want to hear from you so we can keep putting out more content that's going to serve you and that is aligned with what it is that you're looking for. So, anyways, thank you so much for being here, Kara. You've been amazing. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As always, I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.